Welcome back to Jacques in the Garden. Today we have an ambitious day ahead of us because we are going to be doing a lot of planting, but I'm also going to be harvesting out the rest of my garlic patch. More on why the rest and why there's such a patchy picture behind me here. And also I plan on harvesting all of the wheat today. We had a random rain the other day, which I can't complain about. It was ½ inch of rain, which was pretty incredible, but you don't want rain on your wheat crop. So I want to get this harvested and stored in the shed. We're not going to process it today, but I do want to at least get this bed reset, and also I still have to plant out one more bed over here. And currently the only thing growing in it are all of my grafted tomatoes. So more on all of that in a second, but first let's get into the garlic and I'll show you what I have harvested already before we come out here to harvest the rest of this. All right, so here is some of the garlic that has been harvested already. As you could see, I've actually had some really good success with it this year. These heads are absolutely monsters. They're massive. I mean, look at that clove in there. It's bigger than my thumb. So I'm very, very pleased overall with the harvest of garlic from the garden. This is some of it over here. And then the rest of it is basically laid out on this little mesh table that I've used in the past. This is basically what I always use to cure my onions and my garlic. And these are also quite respectable in size. Maybe not quite as big as some of those other ones, but there's a lot of really good size ones. Of course, there are also some small ones. Don't worry. I also have small garlic. It's not like they're all absolutely perfect. Some of them basically just, I don't even know if that's worth processing. So this is what we're doing right now. We are curing this. I'll talk more about that in a second, but now let's pop over to the garlic patch. So there are a couple reasons why my garlic patch isn't as consistently harvested all at once like it traditionally is. Now, first off, I have a bunch of different varieties in here. I think this year was like 4 to 6, which I don't even know why I do this because I label them all. I do it all carefully. And then when I harvest them, I honestly always just jumble it all together and I have no idea what's what. And it's just a really silly thing. I don't know why I'm like this, but I am, so I can't deny it. Now, the other thing I'll mention is that this has just been an extremely weird weather year. So we've had a lot of inconsistent heat. We've had some cold weather. The rain has been really sporadic this year. So I think everything is a little bit confused. The fact that I've been harvesting garlic actually in April is already an oddity in itself. Like, this is garlic that has only been in the ground for at the most 6 months. That's pretty incredible. Like 5 to 4 months for some of the earliest harvest and 6 months now for the rest of this harvest, because I planted them all in December and it's all ready now. That's very odd. It's one of these weird San Diego things. You just kind of roll with it and go with whatever your garden gives you. So these are the ones that are left. I'll show you what I'm looking for before harvesting and why I left some of these in the ground as they are. All right, so if you look at this patch, you could see kind of some of the inconsistency here. Like this garlic here has a ton of green growth up above it. It actually has more green leaves than it has dead leaves. And usually you wanna wait until at least half the leaves are dead. But at this point, this whole patch is coming out and this one is too. And right in the row next to it, this is the exact same variety. That guy has like basically 2 green leaves left and everything else is entirely dead. So it's just been a little inconsistent, and sometimes you just have to do what your garden tells you. In this case, the garlic was telling me it needed a little more time. So I decided, you know what, that's fine. I could let this patch ride for another couple weeks. So at this point, we are going to be harvesting everything, but that is the basic rule of thumb here. You want at least half your plant to have dead leaves and then harvest it. If you wait too long, like even that one there, arguably, I think this one was left a little bit too long. It got lost in the mix here. And what happens is there's a chance that you're gonna have rotting of your papers. So what I'm going to do here is take this little trowel. I'm gonna pop it underneath the garlic. One hand here, pop it, and let's take a look at it. So what you'll notice is like right here by my thumb, you can see the papers are starting to disintegrate. When you leave your garlic in the ground too long, the papers start to fall off and it's just not going to store for as long of a period of time. But honestly, this is another fantastic size head. If every single head came up like this size, I would be a very happy camper. Of course, some of them are a lot bigger, some of them are a lot smaller, but this is a pretty ideal average size for homegrown garlic. And look at the roots. You could see that on garlic roots, they are quite vigorous. There's a lot of roots on here, but they don't go that far and they're not that powerful. So that is why you could get away with basically planting your garlic so close together. Now, as a contrast, let's go ahead and dig up this one that has mostly green leaves. I'm gonna, again, take my trowel because whenever you don't do this kind of thing, and you could do this on a large scale with like a pitchfork or a digging fork or a shovel, but basically if you don't do that, there's always a chance that you'll break the neck and then you'll have to go dig out your garlic head. So this is pretty funny here. And the reason why this is happening is that this head, I think, ended up being essentially the exact same size as that first one. So now let's take a look at these two garlics that I just pulled. The first one that I said I probably should have picked earlier has a very nice sized head. And honestly, it's basically the exact same as that plant that was way bigger. And that's just because I probably could have left this in the ground for another week and it would have sized up a little bit more. But also, maybe it wouldn't have. So that's the thing with garlic. Sometimes it's a mystery, sometimes it's a little inconsistent. The top doesn't always tell you what's going on at the bottom. You have to pull the garlic to essentially know what's up. But the nice thing is that this neck here has no rotting. The papers on the outside are very solid, and that's what you want for long storage. So now what we're gonna do is just go ahead and dig up the rest of these, and I feel like I might want a little workout today. There's a good chance I'll end up double digging this entire garden bed. Now for sure, I've lost a couple small heads in here. I've also ripped a couple by trying to pull on them. So we're gonna have some volunteer garlic next year, and I'm okay with that. If they grow and they do really well, I might even create my own variety here. So this back bed, I think, is going to be the worst. So far, all the heads are really teeny. I think I just put it too close to the edge here, did not get enough sunlight. I was kind of just pushing the boundaries of this bed, and I guess I pushed a little bit too hard because all these heads are quite small. So these are the garlic heads from that very back row. You can see the roots were pretty good, but the heads are extremely lacking. Some of these are basically the size of a single clove on those bigger heads. So we'll see. I might process those if it's easy enough. But after basically going through and picking all this garlic, what I noticed was that all the garlic that was down on this lower half and that first row there, which probably just had the best location, happens to be Enchelium Red. That's a variety that has historically done really well for me. And honestly, I think I might just go 50% of all my garlic next year as Enchelium Red, since it's proven to be so reliable in San Diego. Then a new one to me was Donostia, which I believe is a Ukrainian variety. Those seem to do really well as well. And then Rosa di Sulmona, that is an Italian variety that's supposed to have a lot of flavor. And again, it was in the region that all seemed to do quite well. So these are all winners in my book. I swear I had another one, but I might just be missing the tag. But regardless, that is the haul. So now let's get this over to the curing area. And as you can see, there were definitely some really big heads in this batch as well. So once again, I've changed my mind. We're not going to bring this immediately to curing because we did get that ½ inch of rain yesterday. The roots are quite wet. There might be some water trapped in like the leaves up above. So I wanted to dry out a little bit in the sun before we bring it into the shade. And so we're going to shift our attention to the wheat here. Now, similar to the garlic, if it gets rained on, if it gets too wet, especially at this stage, which is essentially entirely mature, there's a very faint amount of green on it. If this gets wet up here, they could grow mold, mildews, and even a very, very famous one called ergot, which is linked to some very interesting times in history, including the witch trials. There's also a certain famous bicycle ride that a chemist made based on a discovery of what can grow on the wheat. And that is the ergot, or ergo. I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, but basically, wheat can be destroyed by the rain, so we want to make sure we harvest it so we could preserve this beautiful wheat and make another delicious focaccia at home like I did in the last year. So what I want to do here is we're not going to just mow it all down. I want to bundle it into sheets, tie those together, and then cut that whole stalk, and then we'll bring it into the shed to finish drying. Because like I said, it is essentially 100% dry, but there's like an occasional green head like this one. Some of the stalks have a little bit of greenness on them. So I want to make sure I get it right. So we're going to harvest it, set it aside, and then we'll also be able to replant this bed, which is a hugelculture mount. So the way I'm going to approach this year is I'm going to bundle it with some string and tie them into what are called sheaths or sheaves. I can't quite remember, but there is a specific technical term, not that it really matters for what it's called when you bundle some wheat together, but for the pedantic out there, if you know it, drop it in the comments. What we're going to do is just grab a nice bundle of it like so, get a good grouping. I think we could go pretty tight here. I'm gonna take my string, tie it around. Guess we're gonna tie it a little bit higher so we could cut below, just like that. Nice and tight. So now what I want to do is do that in a couple places before I start cutting to make sure I actually caught everything. And then once we've got our wheat tied up, it's time to get our scythe out. This will make it really nice and easy to cut the dry stalks free from the ground. So I kind of want to try going close to the ground, but not that close because I do have some irrigation lines. Oh, nice. That wasn't bad at all. Looks like I missed a couple. And there we go. We've got ourselves our first little bundle of wheat here, and it's looking really quite beautiful. Wheat is one of the most beautiful plants out there. There's something primal about being so engaged with it. It's something that I think civilization is essentially based on, whether it's through fermentation to make bread or fermentation to make beer. It has been shown, like in all sorts of anthropological studies, that wheat is basically what helped us actually stabilize and form permanent communities. So pretty cool to be a part of that history by growing it yourself at home. It has like a little bit of a magical feeling to it. So here's what's left of the wheat bed. We still have a lot of stubble here, which I need to trample, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do next here. We've got a couple random sections of just straw mulch, which I might just throw in the compost. And then I left this last little stand here to let some friends and family have the experience of harvesting wheat, because it's just one of those things where when you do it a single time, you really start to feel connected to basically being a human. Full disclosure here, I am not an anthropologist, but growing wheat is something really truly amazing, because if you look back through history and the anthropological record, it seems like wheat was basically the first thing that we grew that forced us to settle down in communities, form society, because no pun intended, it takes a village to actually get this done. You have to plant the wheat, you have to prep the ground, you have to protect it from getting eaten by other animals and things like that. Then you have to harvest it all, process it, and then turn it into something. And while a single person can do that, like I did here, I can't do all that on my own and also create a stable life for myself. So this is what brought people together. A lot of it was believed to be for the making of bread, which required a mill and all this other sort of infrastructure and people coming together. Some of the other studies that I've seen is really interesting because there's actually some evidence pointing to wheat being first cultivated for the purpose of making beer. Now, we're not thinking about like IPAs that we drink today. Well, I don't, because I think they're kind of gross. But regardless, we're not thinking about high alcohol percentage beers. We're talking about like super low alcohol, things that basically during the fermentation process creates a clean, safe drinking liquid, AKA beer, and also maybe a little bit of alcohol helps people bond and come together as a society. Who knows? We can only speculate based on the evidence we have, but needless to say, I always feel something a little magical and appreciative whenever I grow wheat for myself. So what we have here is all of our bundles set aside. What I want to do now is bring them into the shed. I'll show you basically what I'm trying to do here. The main goal is to take it out of the elements. And there were a couple like random heads that maybe I just found on the ground when I was cleaning up. And what I did is I snipped those and I left them in a separate bucket here. This will just be a lot easier for me to process in the future. So we are going to come back and deal with this bed, but first we have to get all this wheat into safety, AKA the shed. So we're going to pop into my tough shed here. Of course, the shed itself is full of stuff, but that's okay, because what we're going to do here is I'm basically trying to like set up my wheat like this. So it's all standing, leaning up against something. This will give it a safe environment away from things like rodents, and also obviously keep it out of the rain. So let's go ahead and grab all of it, and I'll set it all up against this wall here. Now I've already done a full video on the processing of the wheat and making bread out of it. And this is a little contraption that I made to help thresh the wheat, which is separating all the berries from the head. So I won't do it again in this video, also because it's not ready yet. But if you're curious, definitely check out my growing wheat video to see the entire process from start to finish. I'm honestly surprised I still have this little bad boy. So right here are all or most of the little bottom cuttings from those bundles of wheat. I could use this as mulch, but a lot of them are really quite long and just kind of unwieldy. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in my compost pile, and it should provide some really nice structure to the compost pile and help aerate it thanks to all these hollow straws. And some of these are actually quite stiff, so I think they'll hold up quite well in the compost. And since we're talking about it, here's the compost pile. As you can see, it's got a lot of green stuff on top that was in desperate need of browns. And this straw here will do a fantastic job of providing just that. So there we go, we've got that set up. As for the old pile here, it's dropped quite substantially. I'd say at the beginning, it was right about this height, so it's fallen maybe about 6 inches. And if we look at the thermometer here, it's sitting just below the steady active zone at under 80 degrees. So I think this compost is also ready to be used, and we might be using some of this today to go ahead and flip that hugelkulture mound. Before we refresh the hugelkulture mound though, I do have to bring this garlic into the curing zone, so let me show you how I set that up. So what we're going to do is add this to the back of the rack here. I like to let them dry fully exposed. all flat like this for a day or two before I actually thread them down into here. I like them to be a little bit dry because while this is good, it's not the best source of airflow, and I just don't have the space to lay everything flat like this. So whenever I do have the chance, I'll take that chance. So I mentioned a couple times that this whole bed where I grew the wheat is a hugelkultur mound. And what that means is that when I created this bed, I actually dug a pit and buried in a bunch of old decomposing wood and then covered it all in soil and compost. And that creates a nice water retentive base, some good soil biology. But over time, it started to kind of spill out just because it's hard to stabilize a mound of soil. But luckily, with all this wheat root and stubble here, that's gonna lock up all the soil, especially the roots. And having all this leftover stubble here is going to do a really good job of catching and holding onto any soil or compost we throw on top of this. Before we actually lay down all this compost and I forget, I'm going to pull back all the irrigation lines, then I'll stomp all over this, bury it in compost, and then we'll talk about what I want to plant here next because I already have a bunch of starts ready to go. You might be able to tell, but this is some pretty coarse, chunky compost. This is what I'm just scooping off the top of that bin I showed you earlier, but that's okay. If it's a little chunky, it just takes longer to break down, which means it's going to feed my soil a little bit longer over time. So now the next thing I want to do here is scatter crab shell meal across this bed. That's just a nice organic sort of fertilizer. It has almost all three of the major components, but it's really good at helping keep nematode populations in check. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to top it off with some Fox Farm raised bed soil just to tidy it up and make it look a little bit more complete so I don't end up dumping my whole compost bin in this one bed. Now that it's all covered in compost and raised bed soil, it's clearly a mound. It looks way more obvious to me at least. And all that's left to do is put the irrigation lines back down and then grab some starts and plant this bed out. So I decided that this bed has traditionally been very convenient to me for growing eggplant because I like to give it a little bit more space. I want it to get plenty of heat and sun, and this bed is a prime candidate for all of those things. The curvature of the bed allows me to pack a little bit more in here than I normally would, given the same amount of space. And what I have here are 2 sets of 4 eggplant that I started from seed. One's called Negrel, and then the other one's called Ania. This is the one that I usually grow every year that I absolutely love. And the way I have it situated is I have about 6 feet from this end to where that last little stand of wheat is, which means that I could plant 4 eggplant on either side at 2-foot spacing. So at 0 feet, 2 feet, 4 feet, and 6 feet. That should give them plenty of room to grow. And then across the rows, I'll also have 2-foot spacing. Now down the middle, it's really tempting to just throw all the eggplant right in the center line, but I decided not to because I figured it'd be a great way to also incorporate some flowers and allow them to be visible since the flowers will be at the tallest point. So we're gonna go in with some zinnias and some cosmos, and we're gonna just mix it up straight down the middle line. Now, just in case, if I'm thinking about the direction of the sun and it transitions like this, I wanna make sure that both of these eggplants has an equal shake at doing well. So I think I'll plant 2 of one on that side, 2 of one on that side, and vice versa. That way they're not all favored on one side or the other. So pretty simple, we're gonna just dig them in. We've already amended the bed completely. So I'm gonna just go ahead and pull my tape out and define my start and finish point, and we'll go ahead and plant these eggplant. The flowers I'm putting in go zinnia, cosmo, zinnia. Each zinnia is different. I have the Alpenglow, I believe that's from Floret Flower Farm. And then I have the Queen Lime from Botanical Interest. And then the Cosmo is the Diablo Cosmo from Botanical Interest, which has a really nice orange-yellow color, if I remember correctly. Now, there is still a decent amount of space in this bed, but eggplant gets pretty big. The other things that I could try to sneak in here that I'm very tempted to do is maybe seeding some edamame on the very outside row here, just to try to get a bonus crop, or maybe some small flowers all the way throughout, like some marigolds. That might be a good idea. But at this point, we've done a lot of work in the garden. We've pulled the garlic, we've harvested the wheat, we've reset this hugelkultur bed. And at this point, I am ready to head inside and drink some water because I'm definitely getting cooked in the sun. Hopefully you guys learned something in this video and you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, what you want to see next, and whether or not you would grow wheat at your house.